I'll forward it to all of them.
All right. So I was just welcoming you guys and requesting, does anybody recognize the image in my background?
So that you have a bigger image. Let's take that look. It looks like, no, not me, you should talk.
We're seeing a lot of
it looks like a hill
look like a
with some vegetation.
I'm just testing your knowledge of your country.
Oh, this looks like the hill descending when we're descending the hill towards Ndop. So
not towards Ndop. That's Ngoketunja Hill or mountain. That's Mount Ngoketunja. So you can, when you have time, Google Ngoketunja. Okay, mountain. This is Ngoketunja Mountain. So I was born at the foot of that hill, of this mountain, and I dwelled there for many, many years. My elementary school is right underneath where you see me sitting. The mountain is right up there. Okay. Before I start with you guys today, I would just like you to take turns in the position where I can see you. Tell me one or two things about yourself, about your interest. Then I would be able to know how to orientate the discussion we are having. I know what I want to tell you, okay? Because we will do a number of things. I would like us to talk about joining the academic conversation. I would like us to look at how you use sources in your academic discourse. I would equally want you to understand how you synthesize sources, especially when you are reading your theory. What is it you do with the theory to be able to use in your work? Because if you are relying on theory, you realize there are just so many theories, and some of the theories are convoluted. They are so mixed up that you cannot just have a grasp of them all at once. So I would like to hear from each and every one of you. Just spend a minute. Don't take more than a minute or two to tell me about yourself and your interest. So let me hear from you.
okay. Thank you very much, Prof, for the introductory statement. My name is Tem Edwinji. I hold an MA in English from the University of Buea.
Okay.
I have been I was introduced into academia, into academics, so to say.
No, academia is okay.
In that respect, I have published 2 articles in 2.
I'm fully aware of your article.
And right now, I'm into a PhD. The focus of my PhD of my research work would be in eco-criticism. Specifically, I would like to examine the poetry from the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, as well as
You froze. Hello? You are frozen. Oh, Lord. Okay, let me see. Start with 3. Unmute yourself. Thank you.
Prof.
Yes.
Hi, Prof. Are you there?
Yes, I am here. I know you are frozen. Your screen is frozen.
Hi, Prof.
Yes. Something is not right with this technology. I am here. Unmute yourself. Thank you.
Oh,
I know you guys, I don't know whether it's because of the bandwidth where you are, but I just sent a text. There are times I hear you speak, and then when I speak, you seem not to hear. Your screen at times freezes. So we'll just have to make do. And in the course of the presentation, if say it freezes, I'll just carry on the lecture since I'm recording. You would be able to follow up. So let me get the introduction. Finish your introduction, Mr. Nji.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. Can
Yeah,
you
you
hear
are.
me now? Because the screen still
Yes.
indicates that it's frozen. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. So I said that the focus of my PhD will be on the eco-critical
Analysis of poetry from the Niger region Delta in Niger Delta region in Nigeria.
and Anglophone Cameroon poetry. So I'm trying to bring the two together. So let me
All
just
right.
conclude my introduction maybe by saying that my MA referenced a lot of your poetry, and so it's quite a privilege to meet you today. Thank
No,
you very much.
it is my honor to have you to have to interact with you one-on-one. Thank you. Can you have another one of your classmates take your seat, and then you
Yes,
can rotate a little later?
thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
Hello, Prof. Good day.
Yes. Good morning. How are you?
It's frozen. Hello, Prof.
Yeah. Just
Are you
be
hearing
talking.
me?
I hear you.
Okay, Prof. I'm called Ebot Agbo Besem. I'm
Okay.
from the University of Yaoundé 1. I had a master's degree in Commonwealth literature, specifically ecofeminism,
Yeah.
from Angel Kinge's Venus of Calacanti. I
Calcanti.
was co-supervised by Dr. Elizabeth Ayuk-Etang. So I decided to come to the University of Buea and continue in the same light with ecofeminism. And since she already has experience in that,
Yeah.
I would like to work on that. For now, I've not decided on the book I will want to use or from where the author will come from. But with time, I'm sure I'm going to decide on that.
Okay. Thank you.
But I have an interest in Cameroonian writers specifically.
All right. We will talk about that. I could give you some pointers. There are many Cameroonian writers that might prick your interest. Okay.
Okay, Prof.
That
That will be very
you might want to look into their works if you are interested in ecofeminism. Uh, many, I'm not even saying many male feminists in Anglophone Cameroon literature, you could explore their works.
Okay, Prof, I'll be impatiently waiting.
All
I'll
right.
be at
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Prof.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, sir. I am Sue Chantal
Wait.
from the Rocoland.
Okay.
I, I had my master's degree in the University of Chang in English and Commonwealth Studies.
Okay.
So my focus then was on cultural dynamics. So I tried to look at Cameroonian writers who have talked about cultural dynamics after the colonization. So I used the works of Kenjo Wanjumbang, that's Lukon and the Leopard, the White Man of God, and the White
Yeah.
Man of Kato. So right now I'm in the University of Buea. I have to switch because I want to see the differences. I want to have a diverse knowledge in the university. So right now I'm in African literature. So I'm trying to extend what I did in my master's dissertation. So I'm trying to look at the dynamics in Africa. So using some of the Cameroonian writers, African writers as a whole. So I'm going to select maybe from Nigeria, Ghana, and the rest to try and build up my thesis. So I was supervised by Dr. Gilbert Safuso. No,
Okay.
professor. It's now an associate professor.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine. I think I still have one or two more people to go.
Hello, good afternoon, Prof.
Yes, good morning. In my kingdom, it is always morning. I don't greet afternoon. You know why I greet good morning?
All right, Prof.
Okay, because joy comes in the morning. I don't bring people sadness. I don't bring people gloom. It is always joy in the morning.
Okay, Prof. Okay, Prof. Yes, I am Nguni Matthews, and I have a master's degree from the University of Buea.
Okay.
And my topic for that master's degree was magical realism and attitude towards evil. And then I worked on two Nigerian texts, that is Ben Okri's The Famist Road,
Yeah.
and the other one, which is Wole Soyinka's Ake, The Years of Childhood.
Yeah. It's not about.
But now, I have a plan to work in that same area, but using Cameroonian text so that I can be able to make a kind of comparative study between African belief systems.
Yeah. You seem to be frozen again. Yes, you seem to have been frozen on mute. Unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, Prof. Okay, Prof. I was saying that my topic was magical realism and evil.
Yeah.
And then I was I used two books. One was Ake, The Years of Childhood, and then the other one was The Famist Road by Ben Okri. Then I actually wish to continue in that particular area, but using Cameroonian text, working in Cameroon, so that I can be able to do a comparative study between the two of these societies, that is Cameroonian society and the Nigerian society. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks.
Prof,
Have I?
my
Yeah, go ahead.
name is Elizabeth Ayuk-Etang, and
I'm your doctor, your mentee, and I just said that I know most of the students, when we talk of Africa, from the discussions I've been having with you,
Yeah.
we discover that we don't have a lot to sell out there if we don't sell our own knowledge. And that's why you see them talking and they're like, okay, I'll use some Cameroon, because it has not actually dawned on them that we need to sell our own product and sell it well. And I think by the time they will start talking with you and understanding the importance of doing our own work, I think they'll change their mentality and mindset. Thank you. I
All
just
right.
needed to myself. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. I would like to thank you all for taking just a few minutes to talk about your works. I will recap. Dr. Elizabeth actually made a point after listening to you all I was going to make, to reiterate. And I wanted to start by asking a rhetorical question. Maybe you are aware of or you are not aware of. Did you ever realize that when they talk of African literature in the English language, they're basically talking about two literatures? That's Nigerian literature and Ghanaian literature. Did you ever realize that? Okay, now the question is, why would you have writers in your backyard and you are talking about another nation? When I listen to a topic like magical realism in Africa, there is magical realism in Cameroon literature, call it of the English expression or English or say Anglophone Cameroon literature. There is a whole lot of that in it. But if you don't sell it, if you don't study it, right, you are already studying maybe what the people, Nigerians, they are everywhere. They do the studies, they sell their works like you would not believe. If you were Nigerian and you wrote one or two novels, before you know, you have 10 to 20 scholars around the world writing about it. So what happens? People start talking about it. But if you have a very rich literature, like the Anglophone literature in Cameroon, without any talks being made of the literature, that's a dead literature. And I would like to point out something to you. Remember, I want to take you back into history of the Black civilization. Do you know Persia, or what you call Iran and Iraq today, used to be inhabited by Black people? Now there is a joke in the Persian Gulf, and that joke is always, where are the Black people who founded this nation? Do you guys want to know the answer? Very simple. They lived a rich life and they ignored to document their life. They didn't record their history. They died with their history, so they never existed. Having said that, if you don't write about your literature, it is as if you have plants in your backyard and you leave every morning to go and water the plants in somebody else's backyard. And that is not what you want to do. Realize there is water enough for every fish in the ocean. And don't think that if you study Cameroon literature, you would be diminished. You will not be diminished. Look at, when you're studying Anglophone Cameroon literature, put it in the context of world literature. All right? Maybe you might want to start characterizing, not framing it as Anglophone Cameroon literature, but it is part of world literature and Anglophone studies. After this discussion, just go on Google, enter academic or faculty positions in Anglophone studies or world literature. You see how many will pop up. Okay? You would see how many will pop up. So what I'm simply trying to point out here is to make sure you understand that it is no diminishment studying your own literature. You cannot be home where the literature is produced, where the literature is written about, then you don't you don't work on the literature. I have a colleague of mine. He is white, and he has written a whole lot about Anglophone Cameroonian literature to the point that I feel so bad that I can't point to some Cameroonians who are writing about their literature as he is writing. And he has worked with me very closely. His name is Benjamin Fishkin. Okay? So I just want to draw attention to that and to make sure you understand that you have a lot to work on and you have a lot to contribute. Now I'm going to move slowly. Do you have any question right up to this point before I move? Because I want to move our discussion this morning into you as young academics joining the academic discussion in literature. How do you join the academic discussion in literature? We would move from there. After we do that, I would then, I would certainly talk about synthesizing sources, then look at integrating sources, and then we will talk about the MLA format and the MLA style guide, which normally is something that evolves. It is not very steady all the time. If you've read the 2016 MLA style guide, the 2020 style guide might ask you to do some things radically differently. So what I'm going to do, if you don't have questions, is I will share my screen with some PowerPoints, and we will go through those PowerPoints. Okay, I will make clear what it entails to join the academic discussions. You already have some grounding in that. Once we move from there, we look at how you synthesize your sources, like the theories that you are using. And from synthesizing sources, how do you integrate them? From integrating them, what style guide do you use? That will be the core of the discussion that I would like to have with you today. So any questions so far?
So far, no question.
All right. Let me do a screen share. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, Prof.
All right. What I plan here is we have a learning objective, which is simply for you guys to determine the purpose and the audience for which you write. Remember that academic writing is not writing in a vacuum. It is writing you do for a purpose and you write for a specific audience. Okay? And if that's the kind of writing you are engaged with, before you ever start writing, you want to make sure you determine the purpose of your writing. Make sure you understand who will be reading you. and the kinds of things they know and they need to know, or the things you would like them to know. Okay. Um, Another learning objective set here is that you would use common academic genres. When I talk of in college writing in North America is what we call academic writing, like writing your dissertation, writing your journal articles, writing your critical uh, books on literature. Those are, you know, what we call college writing. And also, we would look at how we use sources, not only how we use them ethically. Ethical use of sources is very key and central to academic writing. You don't want to write your paper or write your dissertation 5 years down the line. Guess what? Somebody comes there and reads and says, wow, this person plagiarized. Okay? You don't want to go that route. You want to make sure you give credit where credit is due. The next thing we would see is using the academic language and how you can communicate with your instructors and peers. When I put here classmates, okay, I consider you, the five of you who just introduced yourselves to me as a class. You are peers, but you have to relate to each other. Now, with academic writing, I did mention in point number 2, I talked of genres in college writing. And when we talk of genre, it is simply a type of writing. Okay? And every type of writing would take different forms. They will follow different conventions. They could be prescribed or they could be implied, depending on your purpose and your audience. Now, with the writing you are engaged in as literary scholars, you want, first of all, you are writing, any academic paper you're writing in literature is a response. What I mean by a response is you are reacting to something you have read. You read something, it means something to you, it strikes you, it encourages you to want to say something about what you've just read. It encourages you to share what you understand about the writing. Okay? So now, when we talk about responses, let's look at how that functions. When you're reading your responses, the first thing you want to pay attention to would be the experience. I don't need to inform you, reading is an experience. When you read, you make observations. From the observations you make, they generate, you have an opinion, not only about the work, you have an opinion about the work, you have an opinion about the author, you have the opinion about yourself, you have an opinion about your worldview, you have an opinion about the author's worldview, and you would want to hypothesize or to make a statement as to what all of your reaction bring together. And this is what we call a thesis statement in academic writing. Your thesis statement, is the central argument of your essay. That's nothing new to you, that I understand. Okay? Now, in the course of your reading, also, you want to maybe synthesize or summarize what you have been reading, making points, taking note of the points of agreements and points of disagreements. What is important about noting the points of agreements as well as the point of disagreement is the fact that don't only agree, but always have a reason to agree. And when you disagree, always make sure you have something to back up why you disagree. Okay, now, once you have all of these responses, you want to embark on a critical analysis of the text. It is not, the text generally is not just a written text. It could be a visual. It could also be an audio visual presentation like the one I'm giving you. If you were to analyze any given text, any given visual or audio visual presentation, you want to start by identifying and describing the important elements that constitute the text. And when you identify them, you want to demonstrate, you want to show in detail how the elements contribute to the whole, making it work or not making it work. Next, in your critical analysis, I know you are familiar with the expression literary appreciation. And literary appreciation is just about evaluating the quality and significance of the work. Now, to do all of this, remember, your paper must come through as an argument. And when we talk of an argument, it doesn't mean that you are fighting or that you are just merely debating, looking at the pros and cons. We would look at what arguments do. Okay. With your arguments, we talk of, there are different kinds of arguments. You have proposal arguments. With proposal arguments, you want to define a problem. You want to give solution to the problem. You want to explain implementation of the solution. And you would want to respond to possible objections. That's a proposal argument. But another common form of argument that is mostly common in literary criticism is either position or evaluation argument. But first, let's look at position argument. With position argument, your goal is to convince the readers to agree with you. And to convince the readers to agree with you, you want to pick up an issue introduce the issue. You convey your positions, making your claims. Don't just make claims that are unsubstantiated. Make claims that you back up with evidence, and then make sure that any opposing views that might arise, you respond to them. And that is, by responding to them, is by making statements or claims with evidence that prove the contrary to what the different point of view stands for. Now, with evaluation argument, you want to provide, or the basic thing you want to do is to provide evaluation of the subject based on criteria that you have worked or selected. Are you guys still here? Okay, I see you there, but I don't see your image. All right. I was not seeing your image. I thought for some reason you were not there. Okay. Now, with your different essays that you write, especially your academic essays, you might want to work on informative essays. And the basic contention or the basic thing with an informative essay is to explain a subject. So you could write an informative research paper or report. And what you do is you draw on research to explain and answer a question or describe results. That's what most literary scholars do. When we talk of you draw on research, that's where Dr. Elizabeth's teaching to you of the different theories come in handy. This theory looks at life from this perspective. This author talks about this. How does this work address this question that the theorists have elaborated? How do they describe the results? Okay, so let's move on to different types of essays, which might include personal essays, personal essays do basically three things. They narrate the writer's experiences. I'm glad one of you told me you worked on Ake, the years of childhood, right? That's a personal essay that draws on the writer's experiences as a child, growing up, and describes his personal experiences with persons, his father, the headmasters, and the place, Abiakuta, and vivid details of events of the Ogungun Society or the secret society. You see, this is what constitutes a personal essay or personal narrative. Now, another kind of narrative you want to look at is literacy narrative, which simply focuses directly on narrating writers' experience with learning to read and to write. And I would share with you, there is a common text that I teach. It is an excerpt from Malcolm X's autobiography. I would encourage each and every one of you to read that excerpt of the autobiography. It is available online to everybody and for free. It is entitled Learning to Read by Malcolm X. So having said that, let's look at your research papers. You've already had experience in writing research papers and maybe reports too, because each and every one of you seated here holds at least a master's degree, right? And even before holding a master's degree, you had had the opportunity to write undergraduate research papers. Now you've written graduate research thesis, and some of you have written and published. That is what we are talking about regarding research papers and reports. So what your research paper does is to report information or result. I know I'll come a little bit in depth talking about all of those when we move on to talking about synthesizing sources and using them. So you report information or results, you interpret views on a topic. What I mean by you interpreting views on a topic is that you just don't simply slam your hands on the table and say, oh, Bill's poetry is highly political, right? Without illustrating that, look, this guy is writing a religious poem, but underneath this religious poem, the tone, the father he's talking about, right, is an atypical father, is this, you give an interpretation of your view. You give your interpretation of the topic. Don't just throw things out there. Next, you want to analyze a problem and you want to argue for a solution. We have a problem. Most of you bank on eco-criticism, which is very good. But you can't talk eco-criticism without thinking of the challenges that the anti or the global warming denialists have. That is, you have to point out to them the problems that the universe is facing as far as the ecosystem is concerned, and you have to make it clear what is going to happen. And when you're looking at the text, how does the writer incorporate his or her arguments in their dramatic play, in their poetry, or in their novel? Because with creative writing, writers don't write to tell you, look, I am anti-politics or I am anti this regime. That's not the way they say it, all right? They make a statement that tells you, that is heavily loaded, that points you to that. I'm not going to say, I'm sitting right in front of this mountain, okay, because I hate the greenery behind. It is a statement I am making. If you were to analyze my picture or the video you have of me right now, taking it to be a problem and thinking about a solution from the eco-criticism lenses, you already see the fact that I like to sit with nature at my background is stated fact that I love nature. Do you need to cast calories to determine that? No. But the writer simply does it without telling you that this is why I am doing this, but it is for you to interpret them. Okay? So with your research papers, there are different types of research papers. You have annotated bibliography, which is I'm not going to say it is simple, because you need to research on almost everything that has been written on the topic you are writing about, and you do an extensive literature review of what you have read. Then your research paper, which is the traditional one you do. And as we say, you understand there would be no research paper without, there would be no research paper without a research question. There would be no research paper without a thesis statement. And as I explained a little earlier, your thesis statement is a hypothetical statement that your work, your entire argument would aim at substantiating. Now, with research report and laboratory reports, I'm not dealing with science students here. I would simply have to pass on that. Okay? Let's move on. Now that you're doing research, there is something very central in research papers or researching. And some of them come, you do them either consciously or unconsciously. But you want to be a crop of intellectuals, you want to be a crop of researchers with integrity. What I mean, crop of researchers with integrity, crop of researchers who avoid any unethical uses of material, crop of researchers who make use of resources in a very moral, upright, and ethical way. So you want to start by thinking today how you would avoid plagiarism. Okay? And I'll tell you a whole lot of things about plagiarism as the time permits. I might not dwell all in this few slides, but as time goes on, I would let you guys know how to avoid plagiarism. First, we talk of deliberate plagiarism, which is just the idea of copying another person's sentences. You copy their idea or you copy their style and you pass it off for your own. What I mean here is this. If you pick the work of Shakespeare, for instance, any of his works, and you say, wow, let me use Macbeth, for instance, and rewrite the political situation in Cameroon. And you write that situation without necessarily acknowledging the source of your ideas, then that is plagiarism. Also, you have plagiarism that has to do with, like some people or students are used to, And I'm sure you are familiar with cases where students have actually had other people write their dissertation for them. If you have a person write your dissertation for you, that is not ethical. Okay? And there is also what we call careless plagiarism. This is plagiarism you are not careful about, or it is just because you are inexperienced in handling sources. You get a quote from one book and you reference it to another book by the same author. That is not good. There is one I will talk about briefly, which is very common. How many of you in class or in this group, I would like you to unmute and tell me, how many of you are aware that there is something we call self-plagiarism, that you can plagiarize yourself? And how does it work? Unmute yourself and interact with me, please. Yes, you are. Yes, we can. I can hear you. Did you hear my question?
Could you take your question again, Prof?
All right, my question is this. How many of you in the group are aware of the fact that you can self-plagiarize, that you can plagiarize yourself?
I am not aware of that, Prof.
All right, let me tell you, if you have written, say, what you wrote in your master's degree, okay? If you are to take any idea from your master's degree to your PhD, you must reference that master's degree. That is where the idea was originally elaborated. If not, you stumble, not even if you're stumbling, any critical reader who reads your paper and finds out that you are writing something you have already written without acknowledging the original source, it becomes a source of contention. Say, for instance, when I write a chapter or a book, I cannot just go about quoting the book because I'm the author without acknowledging the original publication. So you have to understand that. Okay?
Yes, Prof.
Okay. Let's move on quickly and talk about writing with sources. I talked about writing with sources, and before I get into the detail of that, you understand sources are all the material that you consult before you ever start your writing. You might start, first of all, you're writing with reading, the basic works you are interested in, what you want to work on, maybe the novels, the collection of poems, but that's not the source you would be using. You would be looking at what others have written, what others have said, what theory undergirds the writer's work. So you would have to develop a perspective on your subject. And this is another point where theory comes in handy. Because with theory, you give yourself, it is like you put yourself a kind of lens. You have a kind of lenses on you, or you give yourself a kind of compass, a sense of direction. This is where I want to get my work. This is what I want to say. Now, before you consult the subjects, the sources that you are consulting, you have to ask yourself a number of questions. Ask yourself what you already know. Ask yourself questions about the subject. What do you think about it? What are you going to do about it? What do others think about it? Are they in line? Are their thinking in line with what you think? And then once you have all of this, now it will permit you to be able, because it is not everything that's a source. It is not because you simply see, right? You see something like this in print, you say that's a source. Not every print material is a source. You would need to be able to evaluate your sources, and very carefully. There are things you do to evaluate your sources. Would eventually talk about that, like establishing the credibility of the author. Let me ask you guys one simple question. Do you believe if your understanding of my works hinges on conspiracy theory, you want to take the conspiracy theory for a credible source? Would you want to take that for a credible source?
No, Prof.
Not at all, because you want to make sure that the source you are using is unbiased. Okay? It is not a biased source. If you get a source that is biased, then please stay away from it. Don't use it. And now, when you are using sources which also hinges on the theories that you are writing on, I would want to drum home that while you might be interested in a particular theory, you want to remain open to multiple perspectives. Because if you read just from the lenses of one theory, you might miss a whole lot about other perspectives, and you can use the other perspectives only to shed light to make sure that they circle back to the perspective or the theoretical perspective that you are using to argue with. Next, you want to make sure you treat your sources very fairly, okay? And make sure you represent or you represent as originally presented. Meaning, if you are quoting somebody, let it be a quote. And make sure you don't have any misspelling there. When you misspell, when you misquote, you would be surprised also to learn that misquoting somebody, do you know what that is? Plagiarism. That is plagiarism. You would be surprised. Next, remember that when we'll be talking about synthesizing sources, I'll talk a lot about paraphrases and summary or summarizing. You want to paraphrase very carefully. You want to summarize very carefully, because the tendency is always to summarize in a way that tells what the author, the original author, is saying. Don't say something that is contrary to what he says in his text. Okay? So let's look at how you manage sources. You need to be able to manage your sources very, very well. One, keep track of the source information as you read. Say, for instance, you pick up a book, and when I say that, I would like to draw your attention. There is a source. I don't know how that is treated in Cameroon, but I want you, like I said, I want you to understand that you want to constitute a crop of researchers and academics apart. Don't do just what is done in Cameroon. Look at what is done globally, if I'm making sense. So when I say keep track of source information, you might even find an important quote from Wikipedia. You know what Wikipedia is?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, Wikipedia is not a credible source. And the reason why Wikipedia is not a credible source is because it is a platform where everybody, educated or uneducated, can come into the page, edit the page, add information or take away information, distort information, or shape information to speak in a specific way. Now, why am I mentioning Wikipedia? I mention Wikipedia specifically because you might find a very important information on Wikipedia, and information that is even referenced. They send you to the book. They tell you this information is from this book, or this book is the book that has been used. What you want to do is to look for the original quotation in the book, and then instead of quoting Wikipedia, you give credit to the book in which it was originally quoted. Because if you use Wikipedia, that would take away from your credibility. I know we could talk about um, establishing the credibility of websites. I'll come to that in a minute. There are websites you can use, right, in your academic writing, but there are some websites, Wikipedia is a no. And if you were to use a blog, then the blog you use, you would have to establish, first of all, the credibility of the blogger, and make sure the blogger is somebody with reputation, is somebody who has a moral compass within the field in which he or she is writing. And I go on to saying, be careful with quotations. And when you are paraphrasing, you want to use your own words and your own words as in paraphrases as well as in summaries. Do not leave any source uncited, meaning cite your sources. Now, when we talk of academic language, I said we in Cameroon, we use standard British or British Standard English, not standard British English, not standard American English. Okay?
Yes, Prof.
So in the US, I tell the students, make sure you use standard American English. It is not that it is better, but it is accepted as a common language in North America. And when I say this, to most of you who are interested in writing either articles for journals or publications. This is where determining your audience comes in very handy. If you are to write a paper you target to publish in an American journal, what do you think the accepted standard of English would be for you to write?
Standard
Standard
American.
American English.
Thank you. And if you are writing for a paper in Europe, use standard British English, okay? Because most people don't even understand that when you are in the context like we are in Cameroon and you write in standard British English and you submit in North America, first, they're just going to look at it and scoff at it. You reduce your chances of getting published, but you would increase your chances of getting published by using the language the people here understand. Okay? Then, think about formality. I say formality depends on the writer's voice and audience. What I mean, I know all the papers you are writing, they are academic papers. So there are papers in which I would not expect you to be writing in the first person. It is not a paper I would expect you to write using slangs or using some kinds of jargon that is not peculiar to the literary field. Next, you would want to follow conventions for grammar and usage. When I say you would want to be following conventions for grammar and usage, I'm thinking there is a very good book, English Usage, by Fowler. How many of you used that book before? If you don't have access to it, don't worry. I'm going to send an e-copy to Dr. Elizabeth, okay? And she would share that with you. It is a voluminous book. It is a voluminous book, but it will help you as writers just understanding how words in English work, how the English grammar functions, and the various usages you make of either words or structures. Next, you want to use standard vocabulary. Use standard vocabulary. Do not use informalities. And as I said before, talking about formality, I said, I don't expect to read your papers reading expression like I, my, your, and things like that. No, generally, your papers should read in the third person, meaning because it makes your work authoritative and it makes your work neutral, meaning it is not biased. If you start using I, my, your, all right, you are already writing a biased paper. So, the last thing I would draw attention to, I call key points in academic setting or communication or writing in academic setting, is the fact that academic writing is less formal than assigned writing. And it is more formal than communicating with a friend. If I meet you and we sit in a bar, we're having a drink, right? We don't communicate. We're not going to be communicating like we're writing. It is just like if we in the bar, do you think I'll be talking English to all of you sitting there? I go broke pigeon when I head go chakara. Okay. So this following guidelines which we talk about communicating with instructor, take the instructor to mean communicating with your audience, with your academic audience, with your enlightened audience. Okay? You want to communicate using the most preferred means of communication that your audience needs. If you are writing to a journal, use the most preferred medium of communication the journal wants you to use. Make sure you use names. And when I talk of using names, I like to point out, don't only use names, drop in names too. You know what name dropping is?
No, Prof.
No, Prof.
All right, it is simple. Say, for instance, you apply or you submit an article to a journal, and you know that journal, say, for instance, I gave you a reference, you can submit an article to this journal. And in submitting the article, you just say, oh, by the way, this journal, I have a very high opinion of it because Professor Ndi told me about this journal. You just drop the name, right? Professor Ndi told me about it. I researched and found how important it was. Or I first heard mention of the journal from Professor Ndi. Just that name you've dropped there can change the way your paper is received. Can already have the person saying, well, somebody has an opinion, somebody talked about it, and this person is talking based on this person's opinion. Then better still, if that person reading your paper already has an opinion or knows the person, the name, or the name that is dropped, they increase your chances of accepting your papers. Okay? Next, in your writing, you want to pay attention to tone. When I say pay attention to tone, it is simple. It is just like, I want to ask something. Look at, I'll retain most of your names, but I'll try to ask the names again one or twice. By the time we meet the third time, I'll have everybody's name. I know I can see Chantal and I can see Ebot. Okay? So let me give you an example. When talking about tone, if I say, Chantal, could you please give me your pen? You see, that is very soft. That is polite, right? But I could still tell you to give me your pen in a tone that is so informal and so rude. Chantal, give me the pen. Look at, there you are like, what is he saying? You'd be like, is he crazy? So when we say pay attention to tone in your writing, people might not be attentive as to when they are trying to push what they have to give their writers. It is like you're pushing something down their throat they don't want to swallow. So you want to, in your writing, ease your writing into your reader's throat with a soft and gentle tone. Yes.
Thank you so much, Prof. I'm happy you have mentioned we should pay attention to tone. I want to just say something for 1 minute.
Okay.
We had a PhD student who was being supervised by, at that time, he was the dean, Professor
Yeah.
Nola Lembo.
Yeah.
And his name is, I think I can even keep it. And then
Yeah, keep it.
he was working on some works and he wanted to cite Alembo. I said, Nol Alembong said A, A, B, C, D, but failed to show us W, F, Y, Z, and he's claiming that he is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you know, with all of this, the way he said it, even it was just a PhD presentation, one of the seminar presentations that we do.
Yeah.
Not Alemo was the supervisor. He was sitting right there. Other professors like Professor Kengason, they were all there, Professor Tala. And when he said it all, he said, so he has come, I don't know if he was trying to talk about literature review or whatever, and his work is trying to show that not Alembo has failed, you know. And when he did all of that, trust me, those people sitting on the panel did not even bother because they saw a lot of ignorance.
Thank you.
In his presentation, a lot of ignorance. But I want to tell you that even if they said they were not bitter, it has fetched him a lot of problems because even after that, the least problem he has now, oh, but it's that good guy. And he went on and wrote something, I was suspended from the university and from the system, you know.
You
So
see?
I just said I should come in to talk about this, pay attention to tone, because you can have something to say and you sugarcoat it or you put it in a beautifully wrapped blanket and you are piercing that wound, it's paining that person, but the way you've wrapped it is different. So I just said that.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I want to thank Dr. Elizabeth for that interjection there, because it is very, very timely. Most students don't know how to soften their language. You know what? I know Mr. Ntem, who's read some of my works, would bear testimony with you. I could stab with ordinary words than I would with very angry and bitter words. I tell you the things, you are swallowing them. You think they are very sweet pills. They get bitter in your stomach, and when you start regurgitating them. So next, you want to pay attention to correctness. When I talk of correctness, I'm thinking of grammatical correctness. Okay?
Yes, Prof.
Because when your audience starts reading your paper and they start finding flaws in spelling, they start finding flaws in grammar. I can give you a simple example. You know, in North America, we are fond of saying we was. All right? If you are reading a paper and you read we was, instead of saying I was, you say I been. Okay? You immediately understand this person is either uneducated or he doesn't know what it means to speak correctly. Next, when you write your paper, I talk of sending to the required people if you are writing a report. And we also talk about guarding own privacy and others' privacy. The example Dr. Elizabeth just gave to us is a young scholar or a potential scholar who did not know how to guard his own privacy and did not guard against others' privacy. Let me tell you one thing. As a writer, I'm not appreciative of critics who only say good things about my works. Listen carefully. Say the good and the bad about the works, but don't say bad about the person. Does that make sense?
Yes, Prof.
The example Dr. Elizabeth gave you was, instead of talking about the work, this young PhD student was talking about the person. You don't have a problem with the person. You have a problem with what the person says. You have a problem with the way the person says it. So never head on attacking the person. That's what we mean by guard own privacy and guard others' privacy. If you guard your privacy, you're not going to talk as if we have a personal problem. All right? Next, and this is the last, you don't want to write anything you wouldn't say to that person face to face. Now, I am going to stop this screen share for a minute and I'll say one or two things. I will say one or two things. And then I would open the floor for questioning. If you have questions, you can ask your questions. And I expect a lot of questions from you. If you tell me I've spent more than an hour, 30 minutes with you, you don't have any question as to what I've said, you know what I'm going to think? Either I didn't make myself explicit enough, or I just was super good, and it is very rare to find anybody who is super good to make an hour, to give an hour lecture that does not raise questions. Now, I want you to take the points I'm giving you as far as writing is concerned. That is the writing you do. I want you to use these points I'm making as your checklist for every writing you write to submit for any reason. The first rule of thumb is honesty. Make sure you are as honest as you can be in your writing. If you are dishonest in your writing, it doesn't matter whether it is a critical analysis or a personal essay or a professional communication in the workplace, you hurt your reader and it creates a whole lot of problems. Because for you to be a credible writer, you need to be honest. So when you write anything, first of all, ask yourself, is what I've said here honest? Is it my honest understanding of it? Is it the way I want the world to see it? If you have a check there, yes, then you move on. Okay? Point number two. Point number two. Think about correctness. I've already explained correctness. I'm not going to dwell on that. And I'll just pass on to the next point. Think about comprehensiveness. If you need me to explain what comprehensiveness is, it is simple. Have you covered all the grounds? Have you covered all the grounds? You wanted to write about this. You mapped out everything you would write. You say, when I finish writing, I'll talk about this, I'll talk about that, I'll talk about that, I'll talk about that. So have you covered the grounds? That's comprehensiveness. Next, think about accuracy. When we talk of accuracy, okay, I know when I talk about accuracy, some people ask, what is the difference between accuracy and correctness? Do you think they're the same thing? There might be synonyms, but are they interchangeable? Are they interchangeable? Do they fall within the same paradigmatic axis? They might fall within the same paradigmatic axis. What about the semantic axis? Do they mean the same? Accuracy is, have you provided enough information that would allow your reader to be satisfied with what you are providing? Okay, next, think about accessibility. When I talk about accessibility, it is the idea there's twofold. Say Abbott writes in what we will call back home in that big University of Buea grammar, which Lapiro sings about, right? To a park boy. Do you think that language is accessible to a park boy? No, no. So you want to write, if you've already mapped out your audience, you write in a language that is accessible to them, that they can read and understand. And you would also think about the medium that you would share it with them. Are you giving them in print or handwritten, audiovisual, or how are you delivering it? That is what accessibility is all about. And next, think about the appearance of your work. When I say appearance, I want to use professional appearance, but I always reserve that idea of professional appearance to technical and professional writing, because they use certain formats. But with your literary writing, we have like a style guide that dictates the way we write. Is that clear? That dictates the way we write, the way we cite, the way we structure our paragraphs and everything. That is what I mean by paying attention to the appearance, how your work appears on paper. How many points have I given you there so far?
6.
6?
Yes, Prof.
All right. If I've given you 6, take completeness. When I talk of completeness, I am looking at the fact that your writing has an introduction, and in the introduction, I can see background information to what you would be writing about. I can see a thesis statement or a central argument. I can see your research questions. You don't need to separate them the way putting subheadings. Just write your introduction, so much so that I see all of these things. I need to see in that introduction too a roadmap. A roadmap is simply, I call that part of the introduction the GPS, the Global Positioning System. It is like a guide that tells me in paragraph 1, I'll be handling this. Paragraph 2, you don't say it in these simple terms. You just draw how you would walk your way through convincing me to the idea you are arguing about. And then make sure that your introduction is followed by the body paragraphs, and that each body paragraph follows the path you had demonstrated in the introduction you would be following. Then, last part of completeness, your essay must have a conclusion. An essay without a conclusion is not an essay. One without an introduction is not an essay. Now, in your conclusion, there are things, some of these things I'm saying, you already know them, but realize what? They say repetition is the greatest way to master anything. So you cannot be mistaken if you hear it over and over. So talking about completeness or talking about your conclusion does a number of things. Your conclusion simply recaps or summarizes what your essay has accomplished. Then, from summarizing what your essay has accomplished, you re-emphasize your thesis, you re-emphasize your thesis statement. And what I mean by re-emphasizing the thesis statement is simple. I don't mean you go to your introduction and you copy a thesis and you bring it to your conclusion. If you do that, that's just the wrong thing to do. Point out as much as you can. In other words, that your thesis, excuse me, that the thesis you set out to defend has been substantiated. Okay? Next. Next. Remember that you don't need to introduce anything new to your conclusion. If there is anything you did not mention in the body of your essay, from introduction to the end, don't introduce it in the conclusion. Leave it out. And you might want to ask maybe a question. That's the only new thing you can bring to your conclusion. Leave it open. A question that would encourage future research, or a question that would encourage you to pick up your pen to write another research paper. On this note, I would give you guys the big screen and I will answer each and every one of the questions you have. The floor is open.
Okay.
You know what? Before I even take the questions, let me tell you guys something. If we were in a face-to-face class, what I tell students is always, look, if you are shy, leave the shyness at the door before you come into the class. So if you are shy to ask me questions, don't be shy. I expected you left the shyness before you got into the Zoom, okay? Just ask a question as if you are asking to a friend. There might be things you know, or maybe I just wasted my time repeating some of the common things you know, okay? But say something, let me know, so that I can be well prepared next class.
Okay, Prof.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof.
You're welcome.
Okay. I must first say that I have learned a lot today. I appreciate that. Then I will move straight to some worries that I have. The first one is in self-plagiarism.
Yeah.
We talked about self-plagiarism, but there is something there which I don't understand. If I have written my master's thesis and I have not published it, and then there is something there which I feel that it is important that I should use for my PhD dissertation. Then I write without indicating. Is that still self-plagiarism?
Yes. You have to indicate. Look at what the mistake we make is that we think academic papers, and because they are not published, you have presented it to the public. It now becomes public domain. Okay. I just imagine that you wrote that same paper and that same idea you are referencing in your PhD, somebody else took it, right? And ran with it because
Yes.
the claim is it has not been published. Would that be plagiarism or not? It doesn't cost you anything as the author of the article to reference that I have written about this in my master's thesis. There is nothing for you to hide. You remember the last point I gave you about honesty. Okay? Your academic writing is about being honest. Where is your information from? If you hide that piece of information from the reader, have you been honest? You see, that is where it starts throwing, okay, your integrity into doubt. You want to come out as an individual with integrity, with unquestionable moral probity, who says, I found this information here, I go there, I find the information. I got this information here, I go there, I get the information. You see, that's what it is all about. And after this, you might want to spend some time on Google. Just Google self-plagiarism, read about self-plagiarism. That's why you would see some authors, some academics, they are writing and making references to works they've published in the past, okay? They are not doing that. They are not doing that to pump up their ego. They are simply being ethical in their writing.
Okay, Prof.
I hope I
Prof.
did answer your question.
You have answered it, Prof.
Okay, thank you.
I have another worry, Prof.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, in a situation where, let's say, Professor Zip has published an article, and in that article, he quotes another author in
Yeah.
his or her own article. Now, I come and find the article in Professor Zip's article, but I am unable to get the original article. Can I use the one, I mean, can I use the quotation in Professor Nzip's article saying that Professor Nzip quotes this particular person?
Yes, that is doable. Realize you can say quoted in. When I talked about you going to retrieve the article in the original, remember I mentioned that if you find an important information on Wikipedia, don't quote Wikipedia, all right? Try to get the original source. But if you have the quote from a reliable and credible source, right? You simply say quoted QTD dot in D, and you give the page.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Okay. Any other question?
Okay, please. Prof,
Yeah.
okay, I will indicate the author and the page in the in-text citation. But when I will go to the reference or works cited, is it the original article that I will indicate, or
No, you don't.
the
You simply look at.
or
I get your question. In your works cited list, you would list Ndi and the work he wrote, right? You don't need to, once you say QTD dot in D and the page number, you are referencing the page number in this work that the work is quoted in.
Okay, Prof.
Thank you. Yes, I know I have another question.
Prof.
Yes, Edward.
Okay. Yes, Prof. I would just like to cue all with my mate back by thanking you very much for such a wonderful presentation.
No,
I've
that's
learned
okay.
quite a lot from what you said.
Thank you.
So I will rather just have two comments to make, not questions.
Okay.
My first comment is that you really help me to understand the idea of keeping track of my sources, because there are moments that one get caught up with preparing for a paper or preparing for a thesis, reading extensively, and then some of the sources get lost in the course of the reading. And
Thank
so at the end now, in order to deal with your work, your facts are missing somewhere, your sources get missing, and then at the end of the write-up that you start thinking about, oh, you consulted this article, how do you get back to tracking it in order to cite at the end of the work? So I really appreciate that particular point. And then my last remark is on just like what my mate here said,
Yeah.
is this point you raised on paraphrasing and summarizing carefully. I linked it with this idea of inattentive or inexperienced citation. Because when I wrote my first paper and sent out, it came back with a lot of remarks that I found that somewhere I was almost, writing some sentences that was, getting me into the trap of unconscious plagiarism.
That's
So
it.
explanation has actually helped me to be more careful when it comes to that. Thank you very much.
No, I thank you guys. And I thank you guys for your attention. I don't know, Miss Ebo, do you have a question?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, please go right ahead. I'll listen to every question and answer to the best of my ability.
Prof, we are more open to Wikipedia when it comes to Googling. What advice do you have to give to us when we have issues and we need more scholarly answers to them.
All right. Look at there is JSTOR. Okay. If your university doesn't have access to JSTOR, let me pause the record. Let me pause the recording. I want to say something off the record. Any other question?
Yes, Prof. It's not, actually not a question, but what you have lectured about writing your research paper, I would say thank you very much, because someone like me, I was lacking, because you've explained my worries and so on. So want to plead that want to know when next you'll be available for you to emphasize on theories and how to handle them. Because some of us, like me, maybe you have a theory that you want to use in your work, but how to apply it is problematic. It's problematic. Sorry. So
Yeah.
I wish to know when to be available for you to dwell on it.
Yeah. No. I think this this is just while it is our first meeting, I just have my hands full. Okay. You cannot even imagine. Your professor at the background knows I have had 2 hours of sleep all night. Even the 2 hours I had to force to squeeze those 2 hours like squeezing water out of stone. Okay. I would eventually get to that. I will talk with your professor. You see, I listed 4 things we were supposed to do. Did we talk about synthesizing sources today? I just mentioned it. I've not talked about how you synthesize sources. Did we talk about integrating sources? We've not talked about. And Chantal's question is just about how do you integrate these sources? Because your theories are the sources you use. And I want to tell you this. I know you do a lot of cooking, Chantal. I can tell. Mhm. But don't worry, I'm Epicurean. I love food. Okay? And I'm also a chef. But I want to use this imagery in the kitchen. When you want to cook stew, you just don't need beef, salt, and water, right? You need beef, you need salt, you need pepper, you need onion, you need this. All of those spices, you bring them together to produce your stew. So when we talk about it, keep this in mind. When we talk about integrating sources, it is how do you make your paper get the taste of the food you want to produce. Remember, writing a paper is like producing a food for somebody to eat, for their eyes, for their brains. Okay? How do you feed them? How do I read and enjoy what you've written? So what do I bring in? Where do I bring it in? When and why? Okay? These are things I will eventually get to talking to you about. In our subsequent meeting, it could be tomorrow, it could be Monday, but we will see. All right? I will have to make a determination on that with your lecturer, and then we will work on that. Because I know, what if I say we will stay here, or say tomorrow, come back in here tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and I can handle you from 2 to about 4, or 2 to about 5. You might not have the time, but let me get on board with your lecturer. She would make the determination for when we meet next. And Dr. Elizabeth, maybe you have a comment or two to make before I yield my time, or a question to ask. Then I would certainly be willing to answer.
Prof, thank you very much. I don't know, I'm just overwhelmed, but I want to really thank you sincerely because this has actually been an opportunity we've been longing for. You might have said some things that other people tell them, but when it comes from from another person, another professor, I think it's different, and they take it differently and they take it seriously. I really want to appreciate you for this time because I know how full your hands are. It has not been easy with you, and but you decided. I don't know. It's like you teach with a passion. You decided actually to give us this time and to help them in academic writing. I don't know. Tomorrow, this hall will be used for a workshop because you and I have had this discussion, and we said we could use today, tomorrow, and maybe even Monday. I'm saying so because they will start writing exams maybe first or second week of February, and I see there is a lot of loopholes. We need to cover up a lot of things. You are not the one to cover, but anytime they come to you, they will pick one or two things that will help them in the other courses that they're going to, write. Um, but I want to say Shanta's question is a problem to the students that I have noticed because discussing the theory, yes, but synthesizing is a problem. Getting and even when I write my papers and you tell me, Elizabeth, this one is a repeat, it's awkward, I'm like, hmm. So I too have learned. But Prof, I want to say this. I don't know how you take it. We have postgraduate seminars on Wednesday coming up. I'm planning that we'll use this hall. If we don't have it that Wednesday, I might move it even to Thursday because I would like you. I don't know if you can give us some time just to give the students some keynotes on academic writing because they'll be doing their seminar presentations. Then after your talk, or maybe Professor Nyamjo, then the student now can start their presentations. We listen to them and evaluate them. But if you are not free, no problem. We'll create another time for that. With these particular students, I think they are enjoying it. And you remember I told you I teach two courses to them. Major African writers, which you had said if you're talking about major African writers, you touch on Africa and then you dwell on Cameroon. And this course on contemporary literary theories and criticism and practice. Practice now is that synthesis. How do we migrate from that theory to practice in our write-up? How do we use them? Do we just mention Helen Sezu or Supus and leave it there? Or we come now and then, start fitting her into the work. So those are some of the things. But I think I really, really appreciate this time and the knowledge. And I did not know about self-plagiarism, to be sincere with you. I just learned it today. And I said, oh, I've been doing self-plagiarism because I've not been quoting my works and myself, and I've been using the same ideas. But I claim that they are my ideas. Nobody will question me for that. So I've also learned a lot about that. And I want to thank you sincerely. Maybe you have just one remark to give to us. And any other information, if you post this on the forum, the recordings, I'll send it to them. And with your email address, with your permission, I'm going to send your email address to the forum for anybody who wants to have a conversation with you one-on-one. Let them continue. But Prof, I want to plead that whenever you're separating with us, give them assignments so that when next we meet, they should do that assignment and try to present it to you. Please. We need assignments, and when next we are meeting with you, you can just send me something that they should discuss and they should work on it so that when we meet, that can be a discussion. Maybe they will do more of the talking and then you just, keep.
No, I understand. For the initial classes, for the initial meetings, let's not worry. I'm not bothered about assignment now. Okay. I would like to clarify one point.
Okay.
Do you want me that when next you have the postgraduate seminar,
yes,
I meet the students to talk about synthesizing sources and using sources? Or do you want me to meet them and tell them again about academic writing? Because if it is to tell them again about academic writing, since we have this video recorded, you can share the link with the students.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
And
Prof.
when I meet, since we realize the greater problem they have is about synthesizing the sources or summarizing the theories and incorporating the theories in their works.
That's very
Okay.
good.
That is, if that's a greater problem or challenge, I would rather, when I meet either with the graduate seminar or students, this group of students, we dwell on those issues. All right, we dwell
Yes,
on those issues, then they can we can work from there. If that is clear, I'm not going to bother giving assignments, but if you want an assignment that I must give, I would just want them. I would just want everybody in the group thanking them for their keen attention and asking them, now that you've understood what academic writing is about, go back, rethink of your academic topic, follow what you've learned today, see if it changes anything from what you wanted initially to research on, or how does today's lecture help you understand what your dissertation topic is all about and how you can direct the dissertation topic. I would rest there and I would thank you once more. So I would just tell you guys bye-bye and would certainly be talking some other time. Okay, bye. Cheers.
bye, Prof. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Bye-bye.
One more thing before you go, please.
Yeah.
The students are saying that paying monthly might be a problem. So, with the conversation we have with Professor Nyamjo, can you just tell him so that there is a fixed amount for them to pay yearly? For instance, if they will be coming here, whether I'm here or not, they must have registered at the center and they were thinking that they could pay 5,000 a year or something. I don't know. So, if you talk with Professor Nyamjo, then you get back to us, then we can now start registering.
All right. I'll have a word with him and I'll get back to you.
Okay, Prof. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Prof.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers.